Hello and welcome to Just One More Watch, and welcome today to a brief review of what I think is probably the best $250 watch I have ever seen. And believe me, I'm now 7 years and 1,000 videos deep into this channel. I've seen a few. It will perhaps come as no surprise that the brand name on the dial is San Martin. I've been saying for ages that San Martin make the best watches around the $200 mark. Sure, they are definitely not perfect. Most of them feature designs not developed by San Martin, but developed by Rolex and Tudor, etc, etc. But there are now an ever-increasing number of original San Martins these days. And this is one of those. It is the SN0129. Now, you saw the pop-up? San Martin sent me this watch for free. I do not have to send it back. I will therefore, of course, leave a link to the listing on their AliExpress store in the description of the video. This one is currently on sale for just over $250. Looking at some of this macro footage, this just does not look like a $250 watch. It looks like something costing at least twice that. And if it had a different brand name on the dial, it probably would cost at least twice that. So what is so good about it then? Well, it's the finishing, the overall build quality, the feeling you get when you pick up the watch and have it in your hand, the finishing, the lume, the adjustable clasp, and the finishing. Have I got my point across yet? The finishing on this thing is next level. It is beyond next level. The movement is pretty basic. The money has been spent on the components that have gone into making the watch today rather than the movement in the back of it, and perhaps there's an argument that that's how it should be. Plus there is the big advantage of buying direct, if you will. I know that retailers get a 50% markup on a watch. So if you buy from a jewelry store, for instance, you're getting no more than half of what you pay for, if you see what I mean. And that is before the brand makes any money in themselves. Plus, I have had online brands tell me that they work on a 3x margin. So you pay triple what they pay for the watch. When you buy a watch direct from an AliExpress vendor like this, there are just so many less people there taking their little nibbles, their little cuts of the profit, and that means you get more watch for your cash as a consequence. All right, what about the basic dimensions and specifications then? I measure this one at 39.5mm in diameter, bang on 13mm thick with a lug-to-lug of 46.3. 20mm between the lugs. The bracelet does taper all the way down to 15.5 and back up to 18 at the clasp today. And as sized for me, it weighs 142 grams. That is pretty much perfect. It's pretty much spot on, exactly what you'd expect from a watch of this size. 100 meters of water resistance thanks to a screw-down crown. Box double dome sapphire crystal covers the dial, and the movement at the back is an off-the-shelf Seiko NH34. Now, I did say the movement was the most basic of the elements of the components used here, and it probably is, but I've said it so many times before, this is really all the movement you actually need in a mechanical watch. It's accurate enough, it's super reliable, and it is also relatively rugged for a mechanical. Now, the NH34 is a 24 jewel 4-hand plus date, so we have a date complication at the 3, hour, minute, and second hand as normal, plus a 4th central GMT hand pointing to a second time zone on the fixed bezel. To adjust the watch, you unscrew the crown, you pull it out to the first position, you roll the crown forwards to adjust the GMT hand, roll it backwards to adjust the date, you pull it out to the second position, the movement hacks, the movement stops, and you then adjust the time. So this one is a collar GMT. It means that if you are indeed traveling between time zones, you must reset the home time. Honestly, I consider that a pretty minor inconvenience, especially given the price. Case finish, if you haven't already guessed, is outstanding. It is so nice. There's lots of high polish here, which isn't going to suit everybody, I admit, and the watch isn't going to look this nice forever if you treat it roughly as a consequence, but if you're okay with that, it is exceptional. Super fine horizontal brush to the sides of the case, there's a vertical brush to the lugs, high polish chamfer on the upper and lower edges. The bezel is actually polished brush polish, so there's 3 different surface finishes there. There's a tiny little lower polished lip which is barely visible, but just visible enough, and it's those tiny details that make all the difference with this one. And the upper surface of the bezel is also vertically brushed, lovely paint-filled GMT numerals, just beautifully done overall. The San Martin branded crown is semi-guarded. The finishing around the crown guards is just as nice as anywhere else on the case. Honestly, you take the brand name off of this and you'd think you were looking at something worth $1,000 US, perhaps even more. The bracelet is perhaps not quite as nice as the case, but it's still okay. It's a 3-link oyster style with high polished center link and brushed outer links, high polished edges as well. Female end links help it to wear nicely on smaller wrists, and there is an excellent, if slightly large, adjustable clasp. This one has the San Martin hexagon logo medallion inserted into it. So it's not etched, it's on a separate piece of metal. Again, this is next level for the money being asked. The clasp itself has a milled upper, milled scissor, and just about a centimetre of on-the-fly adjustment. And then we're on to the dial and hands. Now they do a few different versions of this watch. There's a couple of textured wave dials. I got this one last year and I got the vertically brushed metallic finish. The dial itself is a slightly darker hue than the rest of the watch. Perhaps they could have gone with silver here, but they've gone with something that is veering towards champagne instead. There's just a touch of brown in there as opposed to just straight up silver. It still looks pretty amazing though. Applied high polished multifaceted indices all round with a larger, broader index at 12. There's a frame around the complication, the date complication at the 3 o'clock. Now we've already had a look at the hands in action. They're all flat, silver, high polish, with the exception of the second hand, which has just a touch of red at its tip. The brand hexagon logo again is applied underneath the index at 12, and 3 lines of text, one of which is in red to pick out the tip of the second hand, are stacked beneath the pinion. Again, like the case finish, it just looks so rich and well done. If you stuck the Longines wings on there, for example, I do not think too many people would bat an eyelid. The lume is also good today, if perhaps not as outstanding as the rest of the watch. BGW9 Superluminova on the hands and the indices. It glows brightly initially, but when I turn the speed up, you can see it does begin to fade. Indices first, followed by the hands. You can still get a decent read on it at the end of my test though. I always say 20 minutes is equivalent to 4 or 5 hours of human eye, so yeah, perfectly decent for a watch at the price. On wrist, it's well proportioned and well balanced. You've got good adjustment because of the clasp, and once more the whole thing looks so much more expensive than that $255 price tag suggests. As discussed though, there are a lot of high polished surfaces here. So this one is definitely more on the glitzy and dressy side of things rather than the kind of tooly and purposeful side of things, visually anyway. If you want something toolier, perhaps look at one of their Tudor or Rolex lookalikes instead. I think in particular the decision to go with high polished mid links might be a bit too much for some people. I'm not a particular fan of them myself, but that doesn't mean to say I can't appreciate just how nice this thing is for how little it costs. Alright, moans and niggles. I think this watch is pretty amazing for the money, but that's not to say that I think it's perfect. How could it possibly be perfect? I know some people just cannot come to terms with the San Martin hexagon logo. They went through 3 different logos, I think, to get this one a few years ago, and some people still don't like it. Personally, I don't mind it. Perhaps it is a little brutalist for something this eye-catching and dressy, but I can't see them changing it anytime soon, so you're gonna have to turn a blind eye if you're not its biggest fan. And the case back. The case back is completely sterile. Again, I'm sure there are those who don't like the San Martin logo, will be quite alright with that, but they could have done something. They could have done anything, and instead they did nothing. Sterile case packs are alright if you're Rolex, but on an AliExpress watch it just looks like a corner has been cut because a corner has been cut. And I'm not convinced that second hand is the best thing they could have done here, particularly the counterbalance. They seem insistent on having these big, long counterbalances. Again, I'm not a fan personally. I think it actually looks slightly ungainly and slightly unbalanced as a consequence. And as I said, bear in mind all of those lovely, high polished, shiny surfaces won't stay lovely and high polished forever if you are the type of person who is rough with your watches. It initially looks wow, it might not look quite as wow once there's a few nicks and cuts on all of those high polished areas. But honestly, that's a pretty small list of complaints for a $250 GMT that is as nice to look at and as well finished as this one. They have sold a lot of these already. I'm sure they will continue to sell in big numbers as well. An original, wearable, really expensive looking watch for $250. For now at least, it's number one. Having said that, if you don't fancy this one, why not check out a couple of other San Martins here or here. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. I'll see you again in the next one.